But innovation comes with technology. And we really describe ourselves as a creative team second and R&D team first.
So we are back at the HTC VIVE Theater at Orlando, IAAPA 2023. For those of you watching virtually, I'm sure the rest of you know where you are. And I'm here with Rahul from LAI Games. And what's your role there? You're kind of product?
Yeah, I'm the creative director at LAI.
Creative director.
Yeah.
So what is and so LAI, long-standing arcade game manufacturer. How would you describe LAI?
Well, in one word, it's really about innovation. What we really try to do is when we make our games, we come in with the angle of innovation with technology and storytelling. We don't want to make things which have already been done, and that's a big part of our creative process too. But innovation comes with technology, and we really describe ourselves as a creative team second and R&D team first.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big goals when we describe ourselves.
So what are the challenges like in this industry, like many industries? There's lots of copycatting, and as you're innovating, people are seeing it, and success breeds competition. And so how do you stay innovative and not get into the copy mentality?
So one of the things, I come from software game development. Like I've worked in game development for 15 years before joining LAI. And one of my philosophies is we hire a lot of people, not just who are from the industry, but outside the industry. So we hire a lot of people who have extensive experience in things like motion capture, face capture, We hire a lot of technical game designers from Unreal Engine, And one way is that when we launch a product, there's always a chance that someone is going to copy it. That's could happen sooner or later.
How do you feel it when that happens? So you guys introduced, and I'm not sure, how long have you been with LAI?
About 8 to 9 months now.
Okay, so you weren't there when it happened, but Rabbids comes out and it kind of defines a category. And then it's successful, and then other key people come in and kind of jump on that, and it's not a category. You can't have a category of one. So I guess it only became a category because other people copied it. But how do you feel when people copy your innovations?
I think we don't focus so much on that. That's fine. I think the bigger thing what we feel people cannot copy is the experience part of it. While they do, maybe they copy how the seat is arranged, how the screen on top is done, or the VR parts of the game. But there are a lot of intricate details like secret sauce, which are invisible, which only a player experiences. And I think that's one big difference you feel when you play Rabbids as opposed to a lot of the other rides. We have an entire UX process, and we spend a lot of investment in our pre-production. Almost like 6 to 8 months just goes in ergonomic testing. That's something we don't see a lot of others doing. So I feel that sometimes kind of puts us at an edge. And if people copy us things, it's good in a way because it keeps us also motivated to try newer things. It's a part of the game. I think what we need to always do is just compete with ourselves.
Yeah. You mentioned these phases that you go through. How long does it take to get a product to market? Because one of the things I see with a lot of startups that come in, I work with a lot of startups, right? And they're generally undercapitalized. They've got to rush the product to market. They don't have the rigor to test and iterate and get feedback and then deploy. And so they basically sell what my guess is you guys would even consider a prototype. How long does it take to get a new product to market, and especially with the VR stuff?
So something we are really proud of is our pre-production process, right? We have different stages of it. The initial stage and our design philosophy really is iterate fast, iterate dirty. So we almost like fail forward. We will make things very quickly. Internally, we'll fail. We'll test things. We'll bring in a small test group. We'll go, this doesn't work, but this one thing is awesome. We see people react to it, and then we cling on to it. Sometimes that can take up to 6 months, of like just picking a headset sometimes, Sometimes it could be picking the right kind of motion base to go with. Ideally, it's anywhere between 6 to 8 months, then another year of production. So when people ask us, how long does your game take to develop, a first-party game, my usual answer is a year and a half, at minimum. And that involves all the R&D, all the pre-production, all the dirty design that we do in our studio back in Singapore. It's almost divided into two halves, our studio. One half of it is where the creatives are given a free rein. Like, we have a carpenter in the in-house studio, build something, put it up there, let us test it. The other half is now we are getting serious about it, Let's define the core game loop, and we keep iterating on that. So 1.5 years to get the product out.
Wow. So we talked before we got on stage about this concept of storytelling through technology. And so I want to talk about that. What does that mean to you, first of all? Let's start there.
So let's take, for example, VR. It's a very powerful technology, right? And in gaming, I think we noticed that it started really gaining traction around 2016. And I started working in VR around that time. And what I noticed was, while as game designers or developers, we are very excited about the technology, a lot of times that technology might not translate to great gameplay. And to me, that's the gap. Like, yeah, the technology is there. There's motion capture, there's face capture. Now there's the metaverse hype, right? But what are the problems you're solving for the user, What's the experience you're giving the user that makes the user want to come back and experience that technology again? I think that's where I talk about storytelling through technology. It's not about the novelty of technology, because there's a lot of things that we even test out where it is novel, it's great. You tried the first time, let's say a few AR glasses, yeah, that was good. I won't come back to it. How do you build an experience around it and then gamify it? I think that's really important, so that when people go through that entire loop, they want to play it again. And it's a great mix of technology and design. That's what we are aiming at.
And so so the challenge, I think, in our industry, in the FEC industry, especially with arcade games, is, they've always been what I would call casual, impulsive entertainment, right? You see it, you walk up to it, it attracts you. You tap a card, you put in a quarter. If you're as old as me, you remember those days. You play a game for 3 to 5 minutes, and then, and if it's a great game, you'll keep pumping quarters into it or keep tapping and replaying. But, it's still in casual entertainment. How important is storytelling? I'm thinking some of the great arcade games that I've ever played. Like, there was a story to Pac-Man, but I wasn't invested in that story. There was a story in Time Crisis, great shooter, but I wasn't really invested in the story. I was more about the experience. And so, how do you see storytelling actually fitting into arcade games in our industry?
Yeah, great question there. So when I look at storytelling, I don't look at it as a traditional medium for arcade games. For me, the storytelling in arcade starts from when you look at the cabinet, and that cabinet has that wow factor, and it has a world design to it. So for example, when you, let's say, play a PC game and you play Cyberpunk, it has a world design. How do I translate that into the first look of a cabinet so that it doesn't look generic out there? So you feel like in that space of 25 arcades this arcade has something interesting. This game cabinet has something very interesting. The second step is the moment you interact with the analog part of the arcade, It should feel as good as a PlayStation controller or a Nintendo Switch, So when we are looking at storytelling, we are looking at these incremental steps. It's the experience where everything else is shut down around you. It's only that specific game that matters. And then the third sync is, which sometimes I notice arcades struggle with, the sync between the cabinet itself when it comes to artwork, visual design, and the content inside the game. That has to be cohesive. It should feel almost like if I'm going to separate all the hardware of the arcade and put it in one corner, and separate all the software and put it in another corner, and I'm going to mix it up with everything else, a person should be able to pick up, like, this belongs to this.
And you guys have done an amazing job. I think Rabbids, and I'll just drop some data. I've got access to collection reports from about 100 FECs. George McAuliffe and Howard McAuliffe at Pinnacle and I are going to talk about that tomorrow in detail. But one of the things that came out of that data was, and I've heard this from distribution as well, Rabbids consistently out-earns any of the other simulators across the board by 20%. And that's a rough number, right? And there are some locations based on where it's played it might not do as well, but over a big install base. And I suspect it's because of the things that you're talking about. That might not be, an operator might not be able to recognize that that's why it is, and a player probably can't recognize and tell you. But there's this, when you talked about breaking out the software and the hardware and being able to put it back together, clearly if I look at that cabinet, it's a Rabbids game. And none of the other ones, they're more boxes that are generic. And so I just think you guys, I think you've proven that actually in this segment with an early product.
Yeah, there's this concept in game design we talk about, we call it invisible design. I think the invisible design is really important. It's about how everything comes together. It's even simple things like, let's say, the voiceovers that you have in Rabbids, you know, and how they sound. Rabbids, I would almost define it, it's an experience first, it's a game second. And that's a philosophy we have. That's a very important philosophy because if you look at VR, if all I'm doing in VR is shooting or, you know, interacting with things, now I'm distracted from the VR awesomeness of things around it. And that's a very intricate design. And again, it might be invisible to an operator, or even the player might not be able to put their finger on it. But that is by design and by intent.
Yeah, interesting. And so where do you see, what are some of the challenges with virtual reality? You kind of touched on the distraction, and you know, and people just get in VR and they just want to, like, you know, they just want to experience it. What are some of the challenges when you think about using virtual reality as a display technology or a medium within this industry that you think about, and how you might overcome them, if you can talk about that?
Yeah. So we spent the last 6 months doing a lot of R&D on VR headsets, you know, because we of course want to make more VR games and great VR games. One of the first challenges really is the headset itself. How heavy it is for a kid who's 5 to 6 years old, you know. So if you notice a lot of VR headsets, when people play the game, they constantly adjust the headsets. That means that their hands are not on the controllers, you know. So one of the big challenges is how do you get the right weight, you know, for different demographics, starting from a 13-year-old or maybe even a 6-year-old kid to a 40-year-old, you know, person somewhere there. The second challenge is the onboarding. Not every place can afford to have a dedicated person teaching you how to wear the headset. Rabbids really innovated in that, where, you know, it was non-attendant. Our vision is to push it to the next level, where we want to make it sophisticated, the whole onboarding experience. You're not just strapping something from, you know, something that's hanging above you. We want it to feel like you are unboxing a great product, you know. So
yeah,
that's one big challenge. Like, how do you do the product design of it?
It's really interesting because the way, you know, when you've talked about the
One
box,
second. Ian, sorry, can you
when
hold
you've
it?
talked about separating the box from the software, the VR headset actually is incongruent with that design aesthetic and that style. It's a really good point.
Yeah, and I think then as we go further in, the simple challenge is VR is exciting, we know that, but my suggestion really is in VR, less is more. If you go around here right now, you'll see so many VR games, and they are 6 minutes long, they are 5 minutes long. After a point of time, there's a fatigue, you know, that's creeps in. I learned it the hard way in 2016. One of the first games we made, we thought it was awesome. I was in another company. Everyone in the dev team thought it was awesome. It just fatigued everyone who played it. We made the next VR game. It was as simple as we made it with a wife. It was as simple as hitting nodes in the VR space which would play music. All you did was this. Big hit, you know? So less is more when it comes to VR, and that's something from a development point. And the third is, of course, our industry people use equipments in a very rough way. Like, even if I have an intended design where I want the unboxing of the VR experience, people might just, you know, throw it out. And that's where pre-production is really important, that how do you make sure that there's just the right amount of tension, you know, that people intuitively know if I take out the headset, I need to, you know, put it here. The last thing is, let's say I have a game where there are 3 experiences in that game. I finish the first experience. As soon as I take off my headset, I'm not going to take out my card again and tap in, you know, I'm going to walk away. How do I make that seamless integration now with see-through, that maybe when the experience ends, I can see through the VR headset, I have my card reader right here. I tap, I'm on to the next experience.
Well, you've hit on a big point that I've been trying to work with the card reader companies. Like, how do we solve that at the POS system where, there's some kind of stored value and it's on the card and they don't want to. It would take a re-architecture, I think, of the systems, but you should be able to just point and click to continue. Ideally, I do think mixed reality is gonna become a part of that, and Focus 3 has black and white mixed reality. I think the new VIVE 8 XR, which isn't rugged enough for our industry, has color mixed reality, and we know that that's coming in the next versions of headsets, and it'll be interesting. So if you know that's coming, if you know the mixed reality is coming, are you thinking about how you might be able to use that beyond just the transaction in an experience?
So one of the things we are also looking at gradually and doing a lot of R&D on is large format attractions, even outside of arcades. These could be open spaces as big as this. How does XR come in there? There's a lot of innovation being driven also by companies like Epic Games, Unreal Engine. There's a lot of things we are studying in the virtual production space, and how can we bring something in virtual production to the open entertainment space. It's again going to require investment in R&D because things need to be seamless, right? Running at 90 FPS. The experiences need to be seamless. People need to intuitively understand that, how the headsets work, what the XR experience is there. So within this XR experience, we actually are looking at outdoor spaces more. But as R&D goes, we might stumble into something and go that's super cool for the arcade, Why not use it there?
Yeah, you might find one thing and say, okay, let's double down on that and build something around it. Yeah, that's fascinating. What's the what do you think 5 years from now? Where do you think when you walk the floor of IAAPA, where do you think VR is going to sit, and what do you expect to see?
I think there'll need to be a conscious investment from companies in R&D and time, in understanding that technology is a tool, and if you package anything out there quickly, it doesn't mean it's going to be a hit. I do see a lot of XR technology coming in. I do see a lot of motion tracking, like what Move AI is doing right now. So we, of course, have Vicon, where, an experience like Dreamscape, where you have to go in and you kind of put in all the trackers. But markerless tracking is also coming in. And if I can have a room where there's a markerless tracking and I can see my avatar, and then I just need the headset, It's just like the phone, right? Everything is going away and it becomes smaller.
I'll introduce you to Andy Ray when we're done. So at SIGGRAPH, they actually showed with Dreamscape a markerless motion capture version of Dreamscape with no wearables. And apparently, so we're kind of there, I think. And next year, we're going to see that. And that's going to empower a lot of new types of attractions. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and I think we are going to see a lot more IPs coming into the space too, as there's more confidence that comes in. But at the end of it, I still feel the onus lies on companies to really respect these IPs and respect the technology and spend the time. Because the thing with VR and the thing with XR is that the moment that experience becomes a little unpolished, it takes the person out of the game. It makes them realize that, oh, now I'm playing a game, I was walking around the booth and I was noticing in one of the games there was a lady trying to play this game and she kept struggling to make that, connection to the floor, just so that the tracker could kind of find the floor base. That was taking a couple of minutes. Now my mind is somewhere else as a player. So all that onboarding issues and all need to be going away.
So it just dawned on me, I'm going to go back to the Rabbids and the industrial design of the device to fit the content and the universe. I think what's happened is a lot of operators, because the cost of these VR attractions is significantly more expensive than a non-VR version of a game, that they expect these to last longer, and so there's a desire by manufacturers to make them more generic so they can be platforms, right? So, and you didn't do that with Rabbids. You built, that's never going to be, Star Wars, right? It's always going to be VR Rabbids, yet it's been durable, it's lasted, it continues to earn. What advice would you have to other manufacturers about, how to navigate that space, because operators want platforms, they want how much content you come in, when are you giving me new content? And they hear this all the time, and it's a bit of a red herring, I think, for our industry, where you guys have proven you can actually build a bespoke cabinet that fits the content, and it looks really good, and it's going to earn, and it's going to last, and we're not seeing enough of that. And so what advice would you give to other manufacturers that are stuck in that conundrum?
Well, there are two pieces of advice. One is a little more, it might sound a bit wishy-washy, but you have to believe in your vision, of what you're bringing to market. I think that's really important. Even with the games we are making right now in Singapore, we really believe in our vision. We believe that these are going to be big hits. But the second one is you have to think like a game system designer. So in games, we have this concept of system design where you build systems. So when I'm building, let's say, a game like Rabbids, I'm not just building the entire game, I'm building a motion-based system. And then for the next version, I'm going to add a little bit to it, like a game, and make it a little more different, I'm adding a system like, let's say, how the chair works and functions, within that. I'm also adding a system in terms of how the software operates, right? How the storytelling inside that. So I think defining the systems which can, over the next 3-4 years, be built upon, just like game system designers do. You notice, let's say, for example, you play a Witcher 3 and you play a Cyberpunk. The systems in that are more or less the same. But still, it's tweaked to that IP so that it feels like it's a part of the IP. Because in software, if you make every game completely different from a previous game, it's going to take 10 years, And I think that's the thing, that if you build something like a system, it's robust, it's solid, but it has enough uniqueness, and then you come across a second game and you plan ahead that for that second game, we are going to have these additional features, where 70% still remains the same, but there's still enough newness. I think that's the magic formula.
That's awesome. Great advice. Thank you. Rahul, thanks for spending some time with us. I can't wait to see how you kind of develop and this vision of storytelling through technology manifests in the next stuff you bring to market.
Thank you so much for having me
Awesome.
here.
Cool. Thank you, man.